First solo cards of 20 baseball stars who never made the All-Star game. Every season during the All-Star break, fans lament the players who they think are deserving of a roster spot for the Midsummer Classic, but who were left off. The snubs. While it's bad enough to miss out on the All-Star game during a solid season, coming up empty over an entire career, especially a good career, must be hard to swallow. With that in mind, here are the top 10 batters and the top 10 pitchers, as determined by WAR, to never make an All-Star team. These guys are all wax-pack gods in their own rights, and we're illuminating them with roughly their first solo baseball card. Batters. Tony Phillips, 48.2 WAR. Phillips was the super utility man for 18 seasons and a spark plug for the great Oakland A's teams in the late 1980s. He didn't slow down a bit when he moved to the Detroit Tigers in 1990 and even picked up enough votes to finish 16th in the 1993 American League MVP race. Alas, he was never the top guy at any one position and thus missed out on All-Star action. Tim Salmon, 37.6 WAR. Salmon was part of the pedigree of young California Angels who made waves in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and he won the American League Rookie of the Year award in 1993. His powerful bat at right field garnered him decent MVP consideration for several seasons, but an All-Star berth was out of his reach. Eric Chavez, 37.4 WAR. Chavez was a key member of the Moneyball A's in the early 2000s and regularly appeared on MVP ballots. Even so, there was enough good talent at third base to keep him off the All-Star roster. It didn't help that legend Cal Ripken Jr. was playing out his career at third too. Kirk Gibson, 37.1 WAR. Gibson is legendary for his gritty play, which was at its peak when he came off the bench to slug a gimpy, game-winning home run for the Los Angeles Dodgers in the 1988 World Series. He won the National League MVP that season, but even that wasn't enough to get Gibby on the All-Star team. Richie Hebner, 35.2 WAR. Hebner made the majors at just 20 years of age in 1970 and was the Pittsburgh Pirates starting third baseman at 21. He held that post until he signed with the Philadelphia Phillies as a free agent before the 1976 season. Though Hebner was one of the better third basemen in the National League for several seasons, the Midsummer Classic never came calling. Gary Maddox, 33.8 WAR. Maddox was perhaps the greatest defensive center fielder of his generation, and he developed into a pretty solid hitter during his 15-year career too. There were just too many great outfielders plying their trade during the 1970s and 80s, though, and Maddox whiffed on ASG selections. Jose Valentin, 33.7 WAR. Valentin got somewhat lost in the A-Rod Nomar shortstop shuffle of the 1990s, but the Milwaukee Brewers middle infielder was one of those guys who helped bring the power to the center of the diamond. He had almost no chance of making the All-Star team, though, considering the competition. And he didn't. Dwayne Murphy, 32.5 WAR. Murphy hit for power, ran fast, and was good enough in center field for the Oakland A's to win 6 straight Gold Gloves in the 1980s. With all that great outfielders in the American League during those years, though, Murphy missed out completely on the All-Star game. Kevin McMullen, 31.7 WAR. McMullen shared his 1963 Topps rookie card with Pete Rose, and really never came out of the shadows of the bigger names. Though he did put up some solid seasons as the corner infielder for 16 years, he never made an All-Star game. Earl Torgeson, 31.5 WAR. Torgeson broke in with the Boston Braves in 1947 and spent 15 years as a slugging first baseman for several major league teams. He didn't slug enough to make an impact with All-Star voters, though, and not even his sweet spectacles could land him a roster spot. Pitchers. Tom Candiotti, 41.0 WAR. The Candyman rode his confounding knuckleball to a solid 16-year Major League career as a starter, but not even the knuckler could get him a spot on the All-Star team. Danny Darwin, 37.1 WAR. Darwin began his Major League career with the Texas Rangers in 1978 and didn't hang up his spikes for more than 20 years. Along the way, he started and pitched long relief for all sorts of teams, but never one that included All-Star. John Tudor, 32.3 WAR. Tudor finished second in the 1985 Cy Young Award voting and eighth in the MVP voting after winning 21 games in the regular season. Despite that performance, he didn't make the National League All-Star and never really had a chance in any of his other 11 big league campaigns. Bill Hands, 31.8 WAR. Hands was the second best pitcher behind Fergie Jenkins on the 1969 Chicago Cubs team that tried like heck to steal the amazing Mets thunder. Even with 20 wins that year and another 90 over his 10 seasons in the bigs, though, Hands came up empty in his All-Star bids. Charlie Leibrandt, 31.7 WAR. Leibrandt won 140 games over a solid 14-year career, including 17 for the World Series champions Kansas City Royals in 1985. Even that performance didn't land him an All-Star berth, though. Jim Barr, 30.5 WAR. Barr was a control specialist for the San Francisco Giants in the mid-1970s, but that didn't make him too exciting for All-Star voters. With a high of 15 wins in 1976 and having never struck out even 100 batters in a season, it's no surprise that Barr didn't make the AS cut. John Denny, 29.5 WAR. The most decorated pitcher on our list, Denny won the National League Cy Young Award for the pennant-winning Philadelphia Phillies in 1983. That was easily his greatest season, though, and he was out of baseball by the end of 1986. Fritz Ostermuller, 27.6 WAR. Ostermuller turned in some solid seasons for the Boston Red Sox in the 1930s and for the Pirates in the 1940s. Of course, solid doesn't usually net you an All-Star appearance, and that was the case for Ostermuller. Ellis Kinder, 27.4 WAR. On the other hand, Kinder won 23 games for the Bo Sox in 1949 and finished 5th in the MVP voting that year. In 2 other seasons, he finished 7th and 11th, and none of that was good enough to make the All-Star team. Kevin Tepany, 26.7 WAR. Tepany won 16 games for the world champion Minnesota Twins in 1991 when he finished 7th with the American League Cy Young vote. He landed in 5th place in the American League Rookie of the Year voting the year before and won 143 games in 13 seasons. Nonetheless, Tepany never made it to an All-Star game.